I have a huge misunderstanding of horror books. I'm not scared. The horror genre has failed me. Maybe it's just that I'm reading the wrong things. When I'm reading horror books, I just get bored. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. You are the first people I'm speaking to this morning. I have crawled out of bed and I am having my first cup of coffee. Now, before we get into the discussion of today, which is going to be why I feel that I have a huge misunderstanding of horror books, and it's especially important because I am going to need your guys' help to tell me exactly how I've gone wrong and what I'm not understanding properly about the horror genre in literature, because it's actually been weighing on my mind pretty heavily. We're gonna do kind of a talk as I'm brushing my hair and having my coffee. So if you guys want to pause the video and go get yourself a cup of coffee or a snack, now would be the time to do it. And if you guys are already set, then hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and let's just get right into it. So first of all, I crawled out of bed maybe like an hour ago. This is what it looks like. It's pretty bad. So I have my hairbrush here, and let's discuss horror books. So I was reading Lost Gods by Bram. Bram is an author that normally you would see in the horror section of the bookstore. I found this one alphabetically while I was browsing the shelves at the library. It also has that little actually, that's a lie. That's probably why it doesn't feel like a horror book to me. Because it actually has the dragon on it. So this is considered a fantasy, but I, for the longest time, thought that Bram only wrote horror, because when I spoke to you guys about this, I actually didn't tell you. I stopped brushing my hair for a second, but I want to tell you what this is, or show you. Like, I, for the longest time, thought that this guy was supposed to be writing horror because his own, like, illustrations, I never showed you this before, but his illustrations are in the book, and they're fantastic illustrations. Let me just show you. Okay. The fact that this is a fantasy novel, it does have that little fiery dragon, which is the code that the Mont-Royal Library Network uses to indicate a fantasy novel. I actually didn't notice that. I thought it was a ghost. So it's not meant to be a horror novel. So that kind of takes care of that. But I know that when I have seen Slewfoot in the bookstore, like if I go to Indigo and I look for Slewfoot, Bram is actually going to be, unless he writes cross genres, and I'm just talking to hear myself talk right now, which is like also totally possible. Slewfoot was in the horror section along with the likes of Grady Hendrix and Stephen King, and I think Dean Koontz, who I've never read, but anyway, it was in the horror section. So, and Paul Tremblay. So I wanted to discuss with you guys basically horror novels today, because I think that I've gotten it wrong somehow. I'm pretty sure that I've gotten it wrong. I started off, now if you've been on this channel for a little bit, you guys have probably seen videos where I talk about in the past that I started out my reading journey with Christopher Pike, R.L. Stine. I would have been, around 9 years old, between 9 and let's say 11 years old, 12 years old. And I amassed an entire collection, like maybe 20 or more books of each of the authors, because you had the Fear Street collection, and then which was what R.L. Stine was writing before the Goosebumps collection, and then you had Christopher Pike writing not really in a series, but all the book covers look the same. I'll see if I can find some pictures and put them up for you guys on the screen next to me in case you're unfamiliar with them. But basically, those books, I don't want to say that they were horror, but they were certainly gory, and things happened to the teenage protagonist that you would not have wanted to happen to you if you were that age, let's say. And I don't know that I was necessarily scared by these certain things, but I know that I still remember many of the stories that I read. So definitely they left an impression. But here's the thing. Stephen King as well writes horror. And I think that Stephen King or Richard Bachman, depending on which of his works you happen to be reading, not everything is super horror. Like, yes, in Shawshank Redemption, there's definitely some horrific elements, but I wouldn't say that it's a horror necessarily. And I guess where I run into trouble and where I need your help the most is kind of because, like, when I read a horror book, I'm not scared. I'm just not terrified the same way I would be if I watched a horror movie, for example. And I'm wondering if that's a problem with me, or if it's because the horror genre in books is completely different than horror in horror movies. I was under the impression that it was meant to be the same, and I think that that's where I'm running into the lion's share of my trouble. Because whenever I read, let's not talk about this book by Bram, because obviously that's a fantasy and I just made like a huge mistake with that, but let's say I'm reading a Stephen King. I happen to be reading The Stand right now. Now, The Stand, that's a book that would be in the horror section of the bookstore. It would not be in the mainstream fiction because that's not what people associate with Stephen King. They never have Stephen King books in the K section of regular lit fic. It's really always in the horror section. It's never even in the mystery section. If you want Stephen King, you know you're walking to the horror section and all of his books will be there. But I'm only, like I said, right now, I haven't made it too far into The Stand. I think I'm only about chapter 2, chapter 3. So if it's supposed to be horror, such as I believe it is supposed to be, then I don't know if I'm getting that vibe from The Stand. Like, it's feeling more like a dystopian society situation than it is a horror necessarily situation. And I think maybe I'm having trouble sort of just defining what horror is. Like, is it supposed to be gory? Is it supposed to give you nightmares? Is it supposed to make you so terrified that you don't want to turn the page? Because if that's the case, I feel like the horror genre has failed me as a reader. I have yet to come across a horror book that gives me chills. I have yet to come across a horror book that makes me want to close the book and not turn the page and not read any further. And I wonder if it's because I'm reading the wrong books or if it's because the horror genre as a whole in the book world, as opposed to, let's say, the world of film or screen, is not giving me what I expect it to be, which is essentially the thrills and chills that a screen adaptation would give me. Now, I'm not a big horror movie watcher, but I was absolutely terrified with Child's Play. I was terrified with the Leprechaun series. Nightmare on Elm Street kind of did it for me, but I was also like a teenager when I watched most of these movies, so I was in my most impressionable stage, and I didn't have all of those years of life and like real life struggle behind me to kind of put things in perspective. I think once you've had kids, once you've been divorced, I mean, I don't want to generalize, but like I've had kids, I've been divorced, I've had to go through a personal bankruptcy because of that divorce. So I've lost my house, like there's been some shit that has happened to me. And I just don't get scared the way I used to. And I'm not a big TV watcher. I do watch TV, but I really like my books to sort of take me to like emotional places. And I kind of feel like I'm struggling with the horror genre a lot. It's not because I don't want to read it. It's because it just doesn't incite any emotion in me. And I wonder if that's a me problem or if it's a problem with the genre. And I find that when I'm reading horror books, I just get bored. And in contrast to, let's say, a fantasy novel or a fantasy saga where magic, paranormal, otherworldly elements are always explained. There's always a action reaction. There's always a consequence.
12 seconds later.
Okay, so we were talking about horror versus fantasy before I was interrupted. I had to go answer my door. So basically, like in contrast to fantasy, where anything that is otherworldly has to have action, reaction, consequences, an explanation, some sort of accountability. Horror in that genre, those elements are not necessary. They're not expected. They're not required. You're just meant to take it at face value and accept whatever it is that the author has chosen to give you in terms of telling the story. Like Gretchen Felker-Martin, whose book I read, Cuckoo, she also wrote Manhunt, which was particularly popular, which I haven't read yet. I just found that I was really annoyed by her. I read this book in late 2024, and I was just annoyed because I felt like even she, the author herself, didn't know what her monster was meant to look like. And then she was trying to convince me that it was a scary monster when I couldn't glean from the description of the monster what the monster was supposed to be, or almost like there was more than one monster and then it just like wasn't clear. Like there was a plant life monster that was happening around the property and around the house, but then also a bird like creature, I guess. As you can see, it was not very clear in the novel, so it was almost like the author herself was not clear as to what that scary thing should have been. But then there was also juxtaposed with that the horror of or the horrific situation of the kids, the trans and queer kids being in a conversion camp. So that in and of itself is a horrible, horrific situation. So I get that, but I just don't know if the horror genre at all is right for me. I don't want to kind of dismiss the genre. Maybe it's just that I'm reading the wrong things. When I'm reading horror, I want the horror to incite an emotion in me. I want to feel like, oh my God, I don't want to read this right now. And I want to put it down because I want to be horrified. And I want to be scared. And I just don't know if books that are out there right now are capable of giving me what I want. So this is where you come in, because I have a few different questions. First of all, is it me? Is it me? Is it the horror genre itself? Am I reading the wrong books? What can you suggest? Am I alone? Is it a common feeling that maybe I'm just having trouble articulating properly? Have you guys ever felt this way? All those questions. So I really need to hear some feedback from everyone, all of you that read horror books, because I feel like I have just missed the mark, or maybe, and I hesitate to say the horror genre is not for me, but it's not because I'm scared. I need this to be clear. It's because I'm bored. I'm bored. It just doesn't do anything. Like, I have never considered myself to be a lit fic girl, but even lit fic, like Remarkably Bright Creatures, is actually inciting more emotion in me these days in my life than horror books. Are horror books supposed to incite emotion in you? I don't even know. So anyway, I just wanted to come on and have some coffee and brush my hair and rant with you guys a little bit about the horror genre and just get your thoughts on it. I know it's a bit of a shorter video. It's a chatty video, but I needed content, and this was kind of on my mind. So hopefully you guys will want to interact with me on this subject, and let's just have a discussion. Let's have a discussion about it, and let me know if it's me. Let me know if it's what I'm choosing. Let me know if it's the genre. Pick a topic, write a comment down below, and we will discuss it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today and listening to this verbal diarrhea, and I will see you again in the next video. Ciao for now.